Black CEO mocked by billionaire white family. 12 minutes later, she erased their $3. 9B Empire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. You don't belong here. The words didn't echo. They detonated. Sharp, crystalline, merciless. They sliced straight through the warm buzz of conversation in the penthouse ballroom and left the air motionless, as if someone had pressed pause on an entire world. At the center of the marble floor, beneath a chandelier dripping with 1,000 points of light, 3 members of the Winslow family stood in a semicircle of privilege. Evelyn Winslow, silver hair sculpted into a perfect helmet, held her champagne flute like a scepter. Beside her, her son Carter and daughter Lila flanked her like junior royalty, faces carved into matching masks of amused disdain. Across from them stood Naomi, a simple white gown, brown skin lit by the gold of the chandeliers, no entourage, no visible label screaming status. To the room, she looked like a guest who had wandered into the wrong universe. Evelyn's gaze swept over Naomi from head to toe, slow and surgical, before landing back on her face with chilling precision. This section, she said, voice smooth as chilled glass, is for major donors and partners, not strays from the service corridor. The laugh came in layers. First, a few nervous titters from the nearest table. Then wider, bolder, as the rest of the guests realized what was happening and decided cruelty was safe to applaud. Phones rose in unison around the room, black rectangles glinting like sleek predators sniffing blood. Screens framed Naomi's face, the white of her dress, the dark of her skin, the red flush of humiliation the crowd wanted so desperately to see. Carter stepped closer, smirking, swirling the Bordeaux in his glass. "Relax, mother," he drawled loudly enough for the photographers to hear. "She probably got lost on her way to the kitchen. It happens. Gravity is harsh on the help." He accidentally clipped Naomi's hand with his wrist. The glass tipped. The red wine arced through the air in a slow, obscene curve before crashing into the front of Naomi's gown. Deep crimson bloomed across the white fabric, running downward in jagged lines like fresh wounds. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, laughter, whispers. The kind of ugly, delighted sound a crowd makes when it senses someone has been publicly lowered a few rungs on a ladder they never wanted her on in the first place. Naomi looked down at the stain. A single drop slid off the hem of her dress and hit the marble with a tiny, sharp tap. The sound was so small it should have been nothing. Instead, it echoed in the sudden silence like the first crack in a sheet of ice. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The laughter faltered, thinned, then broke off in uneven pieces. The orchestra, mid-song, stumbled for half a bar before recovering. Evelyn stepped in, close enough that Naomi could smell the expensive perfume coiled around her like a weapon. The matriarch's smile tightened, diamonds at her throat catching the light like frozen tears. "Look at you," she murmured, her voice a soft blade. "Spilling your drink, ruining the dress you probably saved months to afford. This is why certain people don't last long in rooms like this." A few more laughs, weaker now. Naomi didn't move. She didn't apologize. She didn't stammer. She didn't reach for napkins or hide the stain. She simply straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and met Evelyn Winslow's eyes with a calm so unnerving it felt like gravity had shifted. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Naomi. Up close, Evelyn expected to see panic, shame, maybe the glazed look of someone about to cry. What she found instead was measurement. Naomi's eyes weren't pleading, they were weighing, calculating. As if she were taking inventory of the entire room, the chandeliers, the tables, the people, and quietly deciding what each of them was worth. It unsettled Evelyn enough that her smile slipped a fraction. Lila, desperate to reclaim the moment, leaned in on the other side. "Security really should tighten the guest list," she said lightly, her words dipped in venom. "You let one wrong person in, and suddenly the whole night feels cheap." Around them, the guests shifted. Some watched with open fascination. Some looked away, not brave enough to intervene, not cruel enough to laugh again. The photographers stayed locked in, lenses hungry. Naomi inhaled slowly. The wine was cold against her skin. Her heart beat steady in her chest, not racing, not breaking, just steady. She let her gaze travel the room over the donors, the politicians, the executives, the socialites, over the giant LED screen at the far end of the ballroom, where the Winslow Foundation logo glowed above a line of text announcing the historic strategic partnership that would be unveiled tonight. A partnership worth $3.9 billion. Her $3.9 billion. The crowd didn't know. The family didn't know. No one in this room had bothered to learn the face of the black woman whose signature had been holding their entire empire together by a single stroke of ink. Naomi brought her eyes back to Evelyn and spoke for the first time, her voice low but perfectly clear. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Something in the air shifted. The chandelier flickered once. The orchestra's melody thinned to a fragile thread. Somewhere near the bar, a guest who had been recording glanced at his screen and, for the first time, wondered if he was capturing the wrong victim. Naomi's fingers slid into her clutch. Her hand closed around her phone with the ease of muscle memory. One movement, one device, one decision. In 12 minutes, the Winslow family's $3.9 billion safety net would begin to unravel quietly, precisely, completely. But in that glittering, frozen moment under the chandeliers, they still believed they were watching a woman being publicly humiliated. They had no idea they were actually watching the opening scene of their own downfall. Naomi didn't move at first. She simply stood there, the stain on her dress drying into a dark, jagged bloom. But the room felt altered, tilted, as if the humiliation everyone expected had missed its mark and hit something else entirely. Her phone rested inside her clutch, screen still dark. Yet somehow the sight of her hand near it tightened the air like a held breath. Evelyn noticed it. So did Carter. So did half the room. A ripple of uncertainty cut across the crowd. It wasn't loud. It didn't break anything. It just slid under the conversation like a cold draft under a locked door. "Don't bother calling anyone," Carter scoffed, trying to reclaim his bravado. "No one's coming to rescue you," he smirked. "Not in this room." Naomi lifted her eyes to him, slow, deliberate. No anger, no flinch, just the faintest tilt of her head, as if she were studying a child who had spoken out of turn. That alone made him step back half an inch. Phones around the room recorded her posture, her stillness, the eerie quiet her presence carved into the noise. The guests sensed something they couldn't name, a tension that didn't belong to the humiliated, but to those foolish enough to provoke the wrong person. Above them, the chandelier flickered again. Someone muttered, "We need maintenance." But the lights weren't the problem. The problem was the look in her eyes. It wasn't rage. It wasn't hurt. It was control. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Naomi. Evelyn leaned in once more, intent on landing the finishing blow. "Sweetheart," she whispered, venom sugar-coated, "people like you should learn to stay quiet. It's the only way you survive in rooms you don't belong in." Naomi's gaze shifted to her slowly, like the turning of a tide. "I wasn't planning on surviving this room," she murmured. "I was planning on ending something." A few nearby guests stiffened. Cameras zoomed. Even the orchestra, mid-phrase, seemed to catch its breath. Then Naomi did something so subtle it almost went unnoticed. She unlocked her phone with a single glide of her thumb, a soft chime, barely audible. But Evelyn heard it. Carter heard it. The entire room felt it. A tremor of dread, thin as a hairline crack, ran through the marble floor of the Winslow Empire. Naomi's expression didn't change, but her silence spoke like thunder. For a long moment, Naomi stood perfectly still, her thumb resting against the unlocked phone, the glow of the screen reflected in her eyes. But part 3 isn't about what she did in that ballroom. It's about why she didn't break, why she didn't bow, why the Winslows had just insulted the wrong woman in the most expensive way imaginable. Because to understand the magnitude of what was coming, you need to understand who Naomi Laurent truly was. Most people in that glittering penthouse believed success came from inheritance, from lineage, from money that had been sitting in private vaults since before they were born. Naomi's success came from different elements: steel, fire, and a memory carved sharp enough to draw blood. She grew up in the south side of Atlanta, in a neighborhood the Winslows pretended didn't exist on their charity maps, a 2-bedroom duplex, a grandmother who worked night shifts as a cleaner so Naomi could study, a childhood soundtrack of sirens, bus brakes, and her grandmother whispering, "Baby, learn their world so one day you can rewrite the rules." Naomi listened. At 17, she won a national scholarship. At 19, she built her first coding platform. At 22, she sold it for 7 figures and invested every cent into a company no one believed in, Trident Arc, a data infrastructure firm that started as a laptop on a kitchen table operation. By 28, Shed turned that laptop into an empire that powered government servers, international banking networks, and 3 Fortune 50 conglomerates. Now, at 39, she wasn't just wealthy. She was invisible by choice. A phantom CEO whose face rarely appeared online, whose meetings were handled by lawyers, whose deals were signed through intermediaries. Only a handful of people in the country even knew what she looked like, which was exactly why the Winslows hadn't recognized her. 12 months ago, their company Winslow Capital Holdings was already drowning in secret debt. Their real estate portfolio was bleeding value. Their investment arm had 2 assets close to default. The press didn't know. The donors didn't know. Even some board members didn't know. But Naomi knew. Her firm's forensic algorithms had flagged anomalies in their financial records during due diligence. Instead of walking away, she agreed to a $3.9b strategic partnership, one designed not to save their empire, but to test their integrity. She found none. Still, she stayed in the shadows, observing, watching, waiting for one decisive moment that would reveal exactly who they were when no one was watching. That moment happened tonight. Back in the ballroom, the crowd still believed Naomi was merely a guest who had embarrassed herself. But in the reflection of the glass doors, she saw flashes of her past boardrooms where she was ignored, investors who spoke over her, bankers who asked, "Are you here alone?" When she pitched her first platform at 23, one executive had smiled and said, "We're not funding small dreams." She remembered that humiliation, and she promised herself that when she finally entered rooms like this one, she would do so with power no one could take, question, or dress code out of existence. Her phone vibrated softly, one notification. A single message from Marcus, her general counsel, standing by. Say the word. Naomi exhaled once. In the ballroom lights, her stillness had looked like restraint. But it wasn't restraint. It was preparation. The deal Shed offered the Winslows was their last lifeline. They had structured their entire future on the assumption that she would sign it tonight. They had already spent money they didn't own, mortgaged assets they couldn't keep, promised returns they couldn't deliver. They thought they had invited a nameless donor, a woman they could belittle safely. Instead, they had insulted the one person whose signature could stop their empire from collapsing in real time. This wasn't coincidence. This was the consequence of a lifetime of underestimation. Naomi's grandmother used to tell her, "Baby, dignity is quiet, but justice is louder." Naomi finally understood what that meant. She lifted her phone slightly, just enough that the screen's glow lit the edge of her jawline. The message bubble pulsed. Marcus waited. Her empire waited. History waited. Naomi pressed her finger once, lightly, against the screen. And somewhere deep inside the financial arteries of the Winslow empire, the first domino began to tremble. While Naomi stood composed in the center of the ballroom, the 3 people who had mocked her, the Winslows, still basked in their illusion of untouchable power. But illusions are fragile things, built from selective truths and carefully curated lies. To understand how catastrophic their mistake truly was, you need to see the empire behind their arrogance and the rot beneath the marble. The Winslow dynasty began almost a century ago, forged in steel mills and rail lines that carved through the Midwest. For generations, the name carried weight, old money weight, the kind that didn't shout but whispered doors open. Their wealth bought them penthouses, foundations, museum wings, and invitations to rooms where decisions about cities and sometimes nations were made. But a dynasty is only as strong as the hands that inherit it, and the latest generation had hands made of smoke. Evelyn Winslow, the matriarch, had perfected the art of superiority long before her first gala. 61 years old, impeccably maintained, she carried cruelty like perfume, subtle at first, overwhelming when too close. Her identity rested entirely on being a Winslow, a guardian of the family's legacy, a curator of their social dominance. She chaired charity boards not for the cause, but for the stage they provided. Every banquet hall was her throne room, every guest, a subject to be ranked. Then there was Carter Winslow, her son 33, charming in the way expensive mistakes often are. Head never worked a day that wasn't arranged for him. He burned through trust funds, crashed ventures, and accumulated more scandals than achievements. His reputation among the city's elite wasn't entrepreneur, but liability. Every business he touched crumbled under his incompetence, but his mother shielded him from consequences with money and menace. Lila Winslow, 28, was polished on the outside and jagged underneath. She had inherited her mother's poise and her father's entitlement, an elegant predator who made humiliation a sport. She collected people the way others collected art, to display, to discard, to demonstrate power. Her smiles were always too perfect, her apologies always too late. In every room, she acted as if she were the final judge of who had value and who didn't. Together they looked like the portrait of old wealth. But portraits lie. Beneath the gilded frame, their empire was crumbling. 3 years ago, the commercial real estate market slammed into a downturn. Their skyscrapers, once jewels of the skyline, started bleeding revenue. A series of disastrous investments made by Carter, paired with a silent internal audit, Lila buried to protect the family name, pushed Winslow Capital Holdings into a quiet but accelerating freefall. To survive, they leveraged properties they didn't fully own. They borrowed from creditors who expected miracles. They forged partnerships they couldn't sustain. The public saw champagne galas and magazine covers. Naomi saw balance sheets. She saw liabilities stacked like dominoes. She saw unsustainable expenditures disguised as legacy projects. She saw a dynasty standing on a cliff's edge, pretending the ground was solid. And she saw their last hope, the $3. 9B partnership with Trident Arc, the deal announced to shareholders and whispered about by the press as the rescue infusion that would restore the Winslow empire. But the deal wasn't real until she signed it. And in their arrogance, they had mocked, humiliated the person whose signature determined whether their future existed at all. Back in the ballroom, Carter lifted his glass again, trying to reclaim the moment. Lila fussed with her gown, acting bored. Evelyn waved for fresh champagne as if nothing in the world could touch her. They had no idea that Naomi's phone, still glowing softly in her hand, was already connected to a command node capable of freezing dozens of accounts, halting transactions, and triggering automatic retractions in the global banking network. A fragile empire can survive bad investments. It can survive scandal. It can even survive a recession. But it cannot survive Naomi Laurent deciding she is done giving it oxygen. 12 minutes. That was all it would take. Not because Naomi wanted vengeance, but because the Winslows had revealed themselves clearly, undeniably, as people who believed others existed beneath them. And Naomi had no intention of tying her name, her work, or her grandmother's legacy to a family built on entitlement, cruelty, and rot. As the orchestra picked up a new song, Evelyn lifted her champagne flute, ignorant to the storm forming at her feet. Naomi lifted her phone, and far beneath the city, in servers humming with quiet purpose, the first protocol in the dismantling of the Winslow empire awakened from sleep. The ballroom's orchestra drifted into a new melody light, expensive, perfectly chosen to smooth over tension. But nothing could smooth what was coming, not music, not wealth, not the 100-year legacy trembling invisibly beneath the Winslow's polished shoes. Naomi's thumb hovered over her phone for only a breath. Then she tapped. One command, one gesture, one ignition. Trigger protocol. Live. Her screen shifted instantly, its interface seamless, surgical. A quiet vibration hummed through the device as encrypted signals streaked across continents. New York, Zurich, Singapore, financial arteries pulsing awake at her instruction. In her ear, delivered through a nearly invisible earpiece, Marcus' voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. We're in position. Naomi didn't look away from the Winslows. Begin extraction, she murmured. Marcus didn't hesitate, pulling everything. And just like that, the first domino fell. Across the ballroom, nothing looked different yet. But deep beneath the city, in silent vaults of data, a financial earthquake began. Trident Arc withdrew its liquidity commitments. Credit backstops froze. Bridge loans retracted. All forward-facing funding streams collapsed to zero. Billions in projected capital vanished like breath on glass. The Winslows didn't see it. Not yet. Lila was too busy posing for a photographer. Carter was flirting with a donor's wife. Evelyn was scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. But small signals began to ripple at the edges. A CFO's phone buzzed sharply. A managing director's tablet flashed red. A banker at the far table blinked at his screen, then blinked again. Then he looked at Naomi. She met his gaze. He understood instantly. He lowered his eyes. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Naomi. Evelyn finally noticed the shift. Not in the systems, she didn't know how to read those, but in the people. Faces had tightened, postures stiffened. Panic bloomed in small, silent bursts across the room like sparks landing on dry grass. She frowned, annoyed that anything was happening without her approval. What on earth is going on? She snapped. No one answered. But Naomi did. She stepped forward, letting her presence settle like a shadow over the matriarch's certainty. You should sit down, Evelyn, she said softly. Evelyn scoffed. I'll do no such. Naomi's phone vibrated once. Protocol 2. Retraction confirmed. Protocol 3. Account holds active. Protocol 4. Asset suspension executed. Every line of text was another nail in the empire. Across the city, several of the Winslows' corporate accounts abruptly locked. Wire transfers froze mid-route. A scheduled loan renewal, one they depended on, was automatically canceled. Investment partners received instant alerts about a critical financial exposure. Everything the Winslows had been hiding was being dragged into daylight by the cold precision of Naomi's command. Carter's laughter died mid-sentence when his phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen, confusion twisting into alarm. What the? Our liquidity pool just dropped to Lila's phone buzzed too. Then Evelyn's. Alerts. Warnings. Flags. Failures. A chorus of digital panic. Evelyn stared at her screen, color draining from her face. This must be a mistake. Call the bank. Call the legal team. Call. Naomi's voice cut through her spiraling command like a blade through silk. You won't be calling anyone. Evelyn lifted her eyes slowly, fear beginning to creep behind her pride. What did you do? Naomi didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. I pulled back what was never yours to depend on, she said. Your empire was built on borrowed bones. Tonight, I simply stopped holding it up. Silence slammed into the room. A few guests instinctively stepped away from the Winslow family, the way people step back from a building they sense is about to collapse. Naomi turned slightly, lifting her phone again. Marcus, she said, calm as steady rain. Activate the final clause. Marcus' voice returned, steady. Certain. Confirmed. Their $3, 9B deal is officially dismantled. Evelyn's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble. Naomi didn't flinch. The empire had begun to fall, and Naomi was just getting started. The sound of the champagne flute shattering hadn't even finished echoing when the ballroom doors opened, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a kind of quiet authority that made every head turn. 3 individuals stepped inside. Not security, not waitstaff. not guests. They were dressed in tailored charcoal suits, badges discreet but unmistakable, Trident Arc Legal and Compliance Division. Naomi didn't need to acknowledge them. Their presence alone was confirmation Protocol 5 had executed. The room reacted like a living organism sensing danger. Conversations clipped short, chairs scraped. Phones were lowered discreetly, as if even recording this moment might bring consequences. Evelyn saw them and straightened her spine, clinging to the last threads of her crumbling dignity. "Who are these people?" she demanded. The lead attorney, a woman with steel in her posture and ice in her voice, approached the Winslow cluster. "Mrs. Winslow," she said calmly, "I'm here on behalf of Trident Arc and its CEO, Miss Naomi Laurent." The ballroom vibrated with a chain reaction of whispers. Carter turned pale. Lila froze mid-breath. Evelyn blinked as if slapped. "CEO?" she repeated, voice trembling. The attorney opened a folder, thick, heavy, full of consequences. "This is to notify you," she continued, "that the $3.9 billion partnership agreement between Trident Arc and Winslow Capital Holdings is officially terminated, effective immediately." Lila's hand flew to her mouth. Carter swore under his breath, but the attorney wasn't done. In addition, all pending credit guarantees, risk-share agreements, liquidity extensions, and purchase pipelines previously provided by Trident Arc have been revoked. All joint venture capital is frozen, the list went on. Each item another blow. Each blow another fracture in the dynasty. Furthermore, the attorney added, voice unwavering, "Per the terms in Section 14 of your provisional agreement, Trident Arc reserves the right to notify your lenders of any material misrepresentation of financial health." Evelyn's lips parted. "You wouldn't dare," the attorney didn't blink. "We already have." A murmur rippled through the room like a shockwave. Someone at the bar dropped a glass. A donor backed away slowly, as if the family's disgrace were contagious. Carter lunged forward, fury cracking through his mask. "You can't come in here," and Naomi raised her hand. "Just 1 inch." Carter stopped as if someone had placed a hand on his chest. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Naomi." Naomi stepped toward them, her presence a quiet force that bent the air around her. "You built your empire on arrogance," she said softly. "And tonight, arrogance built your downfall." Evelyn shook her head, disbelief splintering her expression. "You can't do this. We are the Winslows." Naomi's voice lowered. "That name won't save you." "Not anymore." The lead attorney continued reading from her folder. "Your creditors have been informed of the collapse of your incoming liquidity. Several have already initiated emergency reassessment protocols. 2 have frozen your credit lines. 1 has requested immediate collateral verification." Carter swayed. Lila clutched the back of a chair. "And," the attorney concluded, "regarding the pending refinancing of your Chicago Tower project, Trident Arc's withdrawal nullifies your approval rating. The loan has been automatically declined." Evelyn staggered as if the ground had tilted beneath her. "That's impossible," she whispered. "It's math," Naomi replied. "It doesn't care who you think you are." The attorney closed the folder with clinical finality. "Expect a full audit within 72 hours. 72 hours. Not long enough to hide anything. More than long enough to destroy them." The 3 attorneys turned and left the ballroom as silently as they had arrived. The doors closed. The room held its breath. Evelyn collapsed into the nearest chair, hands trembling violently. Carter froze in place, eyes unfocused, as if staring into a future stripped bare. Lila's mascara streaked down her cheeks, the first cracks in a porcelain life. Naomi stood alone, unmoved. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't threatened, she hadn't raised a hand, she had simply removed her support. And the Winslow empire, rotting, hollow, overextended, was collapsing under its own weight. Justice didn't need volume, it needed precision. And Naomi Laurent had delivered exactly that. The collapse didn't stay inside the ballroom. Empires never fall quietly, especially not ones held up by reputation instead of truth. It started with a single vibration. A banker at table 3 checked his phone, then another, then another. Within seconds, the glow of screens spread across the room like wildfire. Notifications lit up faces with the harsh blue of incoming disaster. Breaking news. Winslow Capital under emergency review market alert. Liquidity freeze. Suspected anonymous source. $3. 9. B. Deal. Pulled in real-time rumors spread of internal financial rupture. The words hit the guests like cold water. A senator excused himself abruptly, face pale. Two journalists at the back nearly tripped over each other trying to verify the alerts. Half the donors began to slide away from the Winslows as if distance might save their names from association. The orchestra tried to continue playing. The violinist's hands shook. The pianist missed notes. No one noticed. No one cared. The fall of a dynasty was more interesting than the music written to celebrate it. Across social media, hashtags began to bloom. Number Winslow collapse. Number Trident pullback. Number respect black women. Number who is Naomi Laurent. Clips from moments earlier. Evelyn sneering, Carter spilling wine, Lila laughing were already circulating worldwide. Someone had captioned one video, "Mock the wrong woman and watch your fortune disappear." Millions of views, tens of thousands of comments. Every second, more eyes turned toward the scene unfolding in that gilded penthouse. Naomi stood still, letting the tidal wave rise. She didn't need to push it. Gravity was doing the work. Behind her, Carter finally broke. "This is insane," he sputtered, grabbing Evelyn's arm. "Well, fix it. We can fix anything." Were the winds. His phone buzzed violently in his hand. Trading halt. On Winslow Capital board members request emergency session staff preparing for massive layoffs. SEC requests. Documentation. Carter's voice cracked. "Mom, it's everywhere. It's already everywhere." Lila stared at her own phone. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Why are reporters tagging me? Mom, why? Why is this happening?" Evelyn didn't answer. The matriarch who'd spent her life controlling every room now looked like a ghost haunting one. Across the ballroom, guests whispered fiercely. "She pulled billions in minutes. I heard Shay's the real investor behind half the companies in this hall. Whoever she is, she's not someone to cross." Every set of eyes slowly drifted back toward Naomi. Not with pity, not with curiosity, with respect, with awe, with fear. This wasn't just retribution. It was revelation. The woman they dismissed, mocked, and spilled wine on was the architect of their survival and the engineer of their downfall. Somewhere in the growing storm of whispers, someone murmured, "She didn't destroy them. She just stopped protecting them." And the truth spread faster than any headline. Naomi Laurent hadn't humiliated the Winslows. The Winslows had humiliated themselves. All shed done was let the world see it. The ballroom had transformed into something unrecognizable. No longer a celebration, no longer a charity gala, but a tribunal carved in chandelier light. The crowd circled in a widening ring around Naomi and the crumbling Winslows, as if instinctively giving space to the collision of two worlds. Naomi stepped forward, not fast, not aggressive, just steady like a truth moving toward a lie with nowhere left to hide. Evelyn lifted her chin, fighting to salvage dignity from the wreckage. Her voice, once smooth and commanding, now wavered like glass stretched too thin. "You think this makes you powerful?" she rasped. "You think tearing down a family makes you righteous?" Naomi studied her, really studied her, as if examining the architecture of arrogance itself. "I didn't tear you down," she said quietly. "I removed my support. The fall was yours." The room inhaled sharply. Evelyn staggered to her feet, fists trembling. "We built this city's skyline. We funded its schools, its hospitals, and treated people like they were floor stains beneath your shoes," Naomi replied. "Legacy doesn't excuse cruelty." Lila lurched forward, mascara streaking like war paint. "You ruined us! Do you understand that? You ruined everything." Naomi's expression softened not with pity, but with clarity. "You ruined yourselves," she said. "The moment you believed your value was guaranteed, and everyone else's was optional." Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't loud. It was steady, and somehow that made every word land heavier. Carter stumbled closer, desperation cracking his bravado. "We can't apologize. We can fix this. We can renegotiate. Naomi held up a hand, a single gesture. He fell silent instantly. No partnership can survive disrespect, she said. Not in business. Not in life. Silence rippled out from her words, tightening around every guest who'd ever laughed at the wrong moment, dismissed the wrong person, chosen comfort over conscience. Naomi turned back to Evelyn. You told me people like me don't belong in rooms like this. Evelyn swallowed hard, unable to meet her gaze. Naomi stepped closer, close enough that the diamond light from the chandelier cast both of them in the same glow. I don't need to belong, she said softly. I build the rooms I walk into. A few guests gasped. A few bowed their heads. One whispered, that should be engraved in stone. Evelyn swayed, grief and disbelief fighting behind her eyes. What happens now? She whispered. Naomi considered her for a long moment the fallen queen of a hollow kingdom. Now, Naomi said, you learn what it feels like to be powerless, not because you lack wealth, but because you lacked humanity. Carter choked out a protest. Lila began to sob. Naomi didn't flinch. You taught cruelty, she said. Tonight, the lesson changes. For the first time, Evelyn's mask cracked. Tears gathered but didn't fall, held back by decades of pride. Naomi stepped back, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Meant for the family and for the world watching. Power without dignity collapses, every time. Then she turned away, calm, composed, finished. The ballroom didn't breathe until she had taken her next step. And in that fragile silence, every person in the room understood. This wasn't revenge. This was consequence. Outside the penthouse, the city lights shimmered against the glass towers, unaware they had just witnessed the quiet end of a dynasty. Naomi stepped into the night air, calm as if she'd merely left a meeting, not dismantled an empire. Her phone buzzed once, confirmation that the redirected funds had cleared. The $3, 9B, once destined for the Winslows, would now seed a foundation in her grandmother's name. Scholarships, incubators, legal aid for women who looked like her, dreamed like her, fought like her. Naomi glanced back only once. Character, she whispered, is the real capital.